Hello everybody, my name is Mr. Dowling and today I am here to talk to you about the English B IOA. I have already made some other videos about the English B assessments. Please feel free to check those out, but today I am focusing on the IOA. In today's video, I have 5 top tips for you that I hope really help as you get ready for that particular assessment. So, without further ado, let me talk about tip number 1. This is all about preparation. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Before the IOA, try and read the text again. So especially if you're dealing with a short novel or a play, there is no reason why you can't just read that text again in the weeks before the actual IOA. If maybe you are dealing with something a bit bigger or you haven't got time to read the text again, there are lots of study materials out there. Some of them would have been given to you by your teacher. Lots of them are online. Please make the most of those study materials. Please revise them. Another thing you could do in terms of your preparation is actually think about the key passages in your chosen text. So ask yourself, what are the 5 most important moments, incidents in your text? Find those pages and maybe even conduct your own individual practice orals. Maybe even rehearse what you could say about those passages. Because let's face it, a lot of these texts only have 5 or 6 main passages. So that means that you could probably preempt these passages before the IOA and get ahead of everybody else. Hopefully, one of the passages you pick will be one of the passages for the IOA. Right, I am now moving on to point number 2. Point number 2 is all about the planning. And by planning here, I am referring to the time that you will have immediately before the actual IOA. When you go into a room, you select your passage and you start to plan exactly what it is you are going to say. What I would say to you is that you should first of all read continuously the text that you have selected. When I say that you need to read continuously, what I mean is that you should read it normally. Don't just hurry on through, don't skim through. Read it at a normal pace, make sure you are assimilating the information. It wouldn't be a bad idea to actually write at the top of the passage a quick 1-sentence summary of what the passage is about. That could help guide your thoughts later on. I think once you have done that, what you need to start doing is looking at the text, the passage, in a lot more detail, be a lot more focused. So what I would suggest you do is annotate the key words, the key phrases, the key ideas in the passage. Circle, underline, highlight, make notes in the margins. Once you have done that, you are in a great position to group together your ideas, categorize them, and then create a bullet point list of what it is you are going to talk about in your initial presentation of the passage during the IOA. It's important to come up with a list that you can follow in some kind of chronological order so that you are not getting easily confused by your bullet points in the IOA. So that is point number 2. I am now moving on to point number 3. Point number 3 is about the initial presentation of the passage. Here, I would strongly encourage you to go into as much detail as possible. For this part of the IOA, you only have around 4-5 minutes, so there is a limit to the kind of detail you can go into. Nevertheless, we need to make sure that we are saying the right things about the right points in the passage. One thing I would always advise my students to do is to think carefully about literary devices, language techniques, the author's choices when they have crafted this piece of work. This is slightly controversial because there is nothing in the English B IOA assessment criteria that requires you to talk about such literary devices. Indeed, this is something that we would normally associate with English A. However, in the English B IOA assessment criteria, you are asked to make effective use of the passage. You are asked to raise observations and opinions, and you are asked to make references to the text. I think if you can become adept at literary analysis, you'll be able to do all of those things with ease. I'm not saying that we need to break down every single word, but if you see something like a simile, if you see something like a metaphor, why not talk about it? Okay, I am now moving on to point number 4. Point number 4. This is about engagement. Engagement between you and the person who is conducting your IOA. Because after the initial presentation, that person on the other side of the table is going to ask you questions. First of all, they are going to ask you questions about the passage you have just talked about. Secondly, they are going to ask you some wider, more general questions about life. Usually they will link those questions to one of the IB themes, so don't be too worried. But when you are offered these questions, please make sure you are actively engaging with them. Please listen to the questions and make sure that your answer is actually an answer to that question. In addition, please make sure that you're not just a passive participant. Make the conversation come alive. So the examiner, your teacher presumably, may ask you a question and you could say, that is a good question. I suppose my thoughts would be something along the lines of the following. I think having that kind of interaction will really raise your score when it comes to criterion B1 and B2, especially. Also, I would encourage you not to be too worried if the question that you are asked is something that you find slightly confusing. If you are asked a question that at first is somewhat difficult, don't panic. Instead, why don't you say, that is a good question. I would just like to take one moment to think about it. And take a moment, then give your response. Ultimately, you want to remain in control of the entire IOA. Don't ever come across as flummoxed. And finally, point number 5. This is in regards to your language. Of course, you need to be aiming for fluency. Of course, we need to avoid some basic pitfalls. For instance, avoid run-on sentences. Run-on sentences go like this: and. That gets really boring and really repetitive after a while. Please make sure that you are showing an awareness of the general rules of English grammar. We end each sentence with a full stop. So please make sure that there are full stops in your spoken language, not just your written language. Furthermore, avoid fillers, and I am guilty of fillers. Indeed, I'm guilty of run-on sentences. I would try and eliminate them if I were in the midst of my IOA. We are all guilty of these things. I digress. Fillers. Fillers are those sounds that we make. Like, all of these should be avoided as much as possible. It's hard. I slip up myself, but we just need to try and avoid them as much as possible. Be aware, be conscious, and I'm sure you'll have no trouble. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That's everything I want to say today about the English B IOA. I hope you found this video useful. I hope it provides some tips that will help you in the actual IOA. If you enjoyed this video, check out some of my other English B videos. Check out my TOK videos if you so wish. But nevertheless, good luck, and I hope that you achieve everything that you want to achieve in life. Goodbye.